Good evening. Welcome to our, our final installment of receiving some public comments, at least for now, unless the committee decides otherwise, of the Charter Review Committee. And I'd like to welcome everybody for this evening. I just want to thank each and every one of the Charter Review Committee members that have been here. Jeff and I get paid to be here. You guys do not, and you guys have been very diligent in all of the meetings and very engaged, and really appreciate that. So thank you to each and every one of you. So, and I know that Jeff shares that gratitude as well as the rest of the council. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll be taking speakers this evening. We will. I don't have a timer in front of me, and so we do have a timer available to us. So what we'll do is we'll trust everyone to keep it in line. We're looking for about 3 to 5 minutes of time, and you may get some questions from the Charter Review Committee members. If you don't want to answer any questions, then just let us know that. You don't need to feel uncomfortable in any way. Just tell us you're not interested in any questions, and we'll save them for somebody else. We'll make somebody else answer your questions. How about that? With that, we will get started, and I'd like to call Mr. Ron Abraham up. And when you get to the podium, if you could, state your name, and then also give us your address as well, please.
So I think I turned my card in third or fourth so I wouldn't have to be first, but.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's right, no problem. So a lot of the things that I'm going to talk about we've probably already heard in some way or fashion. There's a couple things that are going to be a little bit new. The first one is, since we opened it up to the city charter, I read Article 1. I started to read Article 2 and just kind of figured I can't do anything with that, so I skipped that one. I scanned Article 3 and read the parts on the fire department, police department, and that type of thing, and then the rest of them I read. The first thing that caught me in Article 4 was the fact of all of the terminology being towards the male, his, he. There is in Article 9, Section 7, a heading that says something to the effect of singular includes plural, plural includes singular, and masculine includes feminine. I kind of imagine that was put in there way back when the charter was initially put together, and I think in today's world it's inappropriate and that should be modified. That's my thoughts. Article 4, Section 7, date of election. I read several different places on the election dates and what they can do. Definitely we can reduce some cost if we move it out to November. That's a given. The only thing that kind of stood out when I started reading on cities moving their municipal election to the November election is the fact that, especially in even-numbered years, the ballots are lengthy. People get bored with them, they get lost in them, and they just start making check marks. So I think that's a detractor from moving it out on a continuous basis out to November, in my mind. It causes a lot of confusion. That was one of the standard things that came up in all the different articles that I read. Plus, I think our charter says that it should be the first weekend and first Saturday in April, and judging from all the different dates that the charter had been modified, it's been all over the place, and we do May now. I think May, the first Saturday in May. Even though the charter still says that it should be the first Saturday in April. Article 3, Section 24A, that had to do with the ratio of police officers. I do think that should be increased as we're widening our area, number one, and some of it's becoming pretty rural right now anyway. I think it should be around 1.7 instead of the 1.5. I did some checking on what I could find on the police website, and from 25 to 2015, they've had an average attrition, for whatever reason, of about 10 officers per year. Based on what I could find on new officers, which has just been from 2013 to 2017 based on the Mesquite basic officer training, we've been able to kind of hold that at average of 12 new officers. So we're kind of sitting right on the line there of being even or not. And it will take, I understand right now, budgets and everything, but it will take a matter of years to build up to that 1.7. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 1 year. It's, in my mind, a 4 to 6 year activity to get it up to that level. That also then gives, however the police chief wants to use that to help in different areas. Will it answer some of the questions that the public keeps complaining about, such as we don't see an officer? It's not going to solve that problem. That's a problem of people having to be outside the house and outside the fence to see an officer. If they don't do that, if they're not out in the neighborhood, if they're not outside the fence, they're not going to see an officer drive by. I'm retired. I'm out 4 or 5 times a day. I pretty much see an officer 2, 3 times a day, no matter where I am, out there patrolling the neighborhoods. Article 4, Section 12, compensation for the mayor and the council person. I am definitely in favor of having something for the council, for the city council. I was thinking somewhere around, for the mayor, somewhere around $500-600 per month, and for a council person from somewhere around $450 a month. But definitely an increase for you folks, or for the council folks. Term limits, I'm not necessarily in favor of term limits. That's what voting's about. And limiting the term means that maybe I have somebody that is doing an excellent job that I can no longer keep. They will have to go out at the end of their term. If we do term limits, it should be either 4 2-year terms or 3 3-year terms. That's my thought. But again, I'd rather not have term limits, because somebody that I see that is doing a good job is forced out that I can't keep, and I don't know what I'm going to get in place of that person. Single-member districts. The single-member districts is a big issue for me, in the fact that whatever a district does affects me as a citizen of Mesquite. There are several pros for it: geographic area representation, closer to voter base, viewpoints that able to win the citywide can be represented, less expensive for the candidate that's running. The bad side of that is representative interest of their district, not whole of the city. Council members may have more divergent views, more conflict. Districts are going to split neighborhoods, confusion over district lines, etc. If we go to single-member districts, I would like to see either 8 districts with 2 at-large plus the mayor. If we do a 9 district, it would be 3 at-large plus the mayor. I won't read a lot of this stuff, but a lot of it goes down back to the individual district not representing the whole of the city necessarily. And the last thing I want to touch on that was talked about a little bit at the first session that I attended was education, voter education. Probably 90% of the cities, if not more, that I looked into, their education is based on send them to a website that shows how to register, where to register, how to find your precinct. Here's a sample ballot, have a good time. I did run across 2 cities that have an excellent program. One is Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the other is Madison. Minneapolis has been doing it since, this program since 2013. Give you a quick status and then I'll be done. It's a similar program to what we did for the Street Bond Committee, if anybody remembers that, where we had people go out and talk to groups about the process and what it is. Not saying to vote for it, not saying against to vote for it, just this is what the program is and this is how we got to where we were supposed to be. Their program started in 2013. They had 60 individuals sign up to be volunteer ambassadors. They had 30 participants showed up for the training class, and they have 10 to 15 that show up to actually do the work, which is not unusual for a volunteer organization. Madison, Wisconsin has about the same thing. And what they do is they go out and talk, and they'll talk a person through registration, they'll talk a person through a ballot, they'll talk about the ballot, they'll talk about the representatives that are running on a bipartisan, nonpartisan way. And any of the proposals that are on to vote for, they cover those as to what they are. If you vote yes, this is what you're going to get. If you vote no, this is what you're going to get. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
You going to take any questions, Ron?
I will.
Are you for or against single-member districts?
Overall, I am against single-member districts. If we're going to have them, if they're going to have it, I want to see, if it's 8 districts, I'd like to see 2 at-large plus the mayor. If it's a 9 district, which has been discussed, I'd like to see it be 3 at-large plus the mayor to help balance and watch out for the city as a whole.
Thank you, sir.
You thought about running for council?
Pardon me?
Have you thought about running for council?
No. I'm retired.
That's just a word.
On increasing police ratio, would you be willing to pay more property taxes to see that happen?
Oh, if we're going to increase personnel, we're going to have to increase taxes to pay for it. That's a given. Unless there's a benefactor out there that wants to come across every year with a big check.
Anything else? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Appreciate the thoroughness, too. Obviously spent some time looking into that. Mr. Sergio Garcia.
Hello, good evening,
Good evening.
committee. My name is Sergio Garcia, 1724 Longview, Mesquite, 75149. I want to begin by thanking each of you for your service on this committee during these last several weeks. I personally appreciate y'all stepping up and doing this for our city. I wish more people would be more involved in our community like y'all. I just want to go over a couple things for the record once more. I am in favor of term limits, 3 two-year terms with a 2-year break. I am in favor of single-member districts. I'm in favor of increased compensation for the mayor and council for their service. And I am also in favor of increasing the size of our city council by 2 members. All right, that's just a little, I know I've spoken before, so that's just what I wanted to, at this last meeting.
Any comments from Mr. Garcia? Or questions? No.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Benny Gordon?
I'm in favor for the term limits. I'm in favor for the area where the councilman has more time to work with the district because he's scattered all over the place. You know, when we have these elections, they talk about having it in November. You know, most of y'all know I'm involved in that. And it's a lot of time when you have to put them signs out and all that sort of stuff. And if we have it in November, we're going to lose our way what we're thinking about for the city. If we keep it like it is, it's a lot easier for my end of the deal when I'm putting out signs than it is trying to remember to put out a whole bunch more in November. And I'm going to be busy next year. And but I think like Bruce back here, I get more time out of him if we have the single member districts. And I think when they serve so long, you know, we had some of them serve 17 years in this place. And some of them said, oh, I'm not going to serve no 17 years. And I imagine y'all know the two that I'm talking about. But when 17 years up, they still thinking about doing some more, you know. And I think it's good to have new blood come in every once in a while. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon, if you could give us your address, please.
1918 Del Oak.
Thank you.
That's in Edgemont Park.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Archer.
Good evening, everyone. I normally like to speak off the cuff, but some thoughts I have that I'm very passionate about, so the older I get, the more I tend to forget things, so bear with me. What's different on this side out here? Gives me a greater appreciation for our citizens.
It is a little different, and we do need you to give your address.
Absolutely. I was going to get there. 429 South Walker, Bruce Archer. Mayor Pro Tem Casper, Councilman Noche, distinguished members of the Charter Review Committee, let me first thank each of you for your service over these last several weeks as you have listened to a wide array of ideas directly from the people of Mesquite about the future of our city charter and the future of our great city. And words cannot express how proud I am of the fantastic dialogue that's taken place and the free exchange of ideas and the very healthy public debate on important issues for our city's future and our democracy, if you will, here in Mesquite, Texas. This has truly been a most historic endeavor for our city, and I'm most proud. I'm proud of all of you as well for serving. I'm not here to discuss any of the proposed charter amendments or any of the various ideas that have been discussed. All have been great. A lot of folks know where I stand on some of these issues. I'm not too bashful about my thoughts, but instead I'd like to offer my 2 cents tonight on a very important question that I heard back and forth among all of your discussions at all the meetings that we've had. And that is, how do we get more people involved in the process in Mesquite? I believe that the involvement that was sought from that question was 3 things. Number 1, getting more people to participate and volunteer in the community and be more informed. Number 2, encouraging more people to run for council. And number 3, encouraging more people to vote locally. There's no doubt that there is a number of ways to create some real synergy and energy so that more citizens of Mesquite will step up when it comes to serving their city and not just having the mindset that says, hey, I voted in the presidential election, I've done my duty. We know that we have got to change that mindset in our city. Because the truth is, short of war, what affects our lives day to day versus what goes on in Washington, D.C. versus what goes on in City Hall is very different. Our lives are much more impacted by what goes on at City Hall day to day than what goes on in Washington. Having safe drinking water that doesn't bankrupt us, having quality fire and police protection, roads that don't feel like the surface of the moon, animal control, code enforcement, and those of us who are elected and our city employees, our volunteers, our board and commission members, we're on the front lines of truly impacting and affecting people's lives in a very powerful way every day. Just a few years ago, apathy was worse than I'd ever seen in our city, and I grew up here, as did some of you. In fact, because of my dad, I somewhat grew up around City Hall. We've come a long way since then. We have healthy crowds that are once afternoon, but now evening council meetings. Yes, sometimes people complain and they voice their concerns, but doesn't that make us better at serving our citizens when we listen to those concerns and complaints? We have council members who hold town hall meetings to inform residents or to address specific issues in a specific part of our city. Our city staff puts on fantastic town hall Tuesdays where we get some great information given out to our citizens and have some good give and take and input from our citizens. We have tremendous social media engagement from our residents. Now, if you're a council member, that can sometimes be a blessing or a curse, depending on the situation. But let us nonetheless rejoice that we are seeing more and more of our citizens concerned and passionate and sharing their views and their vision of what they think should happen in our city and where our city should go in the future. That's just a blessing. More citizens are stepping up to serve our boards and commissions. I enjoy those votes when we get to do that. But with all this progress, for our city to really be the shining city on a hill that I believe that we all know it can be, there is much more work to be done, and many more citizens will need to continue to step up. Government cannot and should not do everything. An active citizenry is part of the critical equation for any community to progress. And I think all of you have come to that conclusion from what I've been hearing. So how do we get more people involved in Mesquite? As I said, I'm sure there are a number of ways to do it, and I know some of those possibilities have been discussed among this group. But what I have found historically to be most effective is elected leaders and other leaders in the community working as community organizers. That inspiration, motivation, recruitment.
Mr. Archer, can you, there are more than 4 council members that are present tonight. What's posted is the Charter Review Committee.
Okay.
So if you could bring it back to that, that would help us in terms of complying with the state law. So.
Okay. All right, so, okay, give me a second to rebound here because we've talked a lot about engagement and getting citizens involved. So I'll just say that there's an entire population in our city that needs to be connected to. And if we as leaders can get out there and connect more with those folks, knock on doors, have meet your councilman events, be accessible. Historically, many cities around this country, when they have leaders organized throughout their older suburbs or aging urban areas, we see rejuvenation and things begin to turn around. So I'll make this very brief and just say that I know all of us have jobs and things to do and other obligations, but I believe that if we all were in this community doing a little bit geographically all over, imagine how much more engagement and how many more citizens will get involved that right now don't even think that they can have a say or have any involvement whatsoever. We need to empower people in this city to know that they can do more and have more of a say and recruit them to be future leaders of this community. So I thank you for your time and the opportunity to share this. Be happy to answer any questions tonight.
Where you stand on single-member districts?
You know, I'm torn on that issue. I see, as the other speaker said, I see benefit and negativity. The benefit, I think, having council members working their district, being fully accountable to residents, knowing that they're out there taking care of the needs of those folks' concerns and being accessible to those residents, I think is very, very important. The flip side of that concerns me is having, again, that focus on that geographical area and not to focus on the entire city and perhaps some feuding, if you will, back and forth. So I think there's a lot of merit on both sides of that. But so I'm kind of torn. But I could support it being on the ballot.
Thanks.
Sorry about that. What is your thought on the increase of police officers and raising that ratio up?
You know, I'm pleased that right now that we are budgeted for, I believe, a number that actually probably a little bit exceeds our 1.5 ratio. But I think it's important for us to show the community that's so concerned about crime and safety that we are going to make a commitment. I say we, the citizens, would make a commitment to, in my opinion, raise it from 1.5 to 1.6 this charter election, which I believe would keep us revenue neutral for now, and as the other gentleman said, at least perhaps begin to prepare financially to increase that to maybe 1.7 to give us several more over the next few years.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What about November voting?
You know, I have also mixed feelings about it. I'm certainly happy to support it being on the ballot because I think it's a worthwhile electoral reform to be discussed. Councilman Casper has had some very eloquent input and suggestions about getting a lot more folks involved in the voting process if we did that. I guess the flip side concern I have is so many of those voters who come out in November are so often focused on the higher ballot measures that I know myself, just as a human being, when I vote on the judicial races and the lower ballot races that sometimes perhaps I haven't had as much time as I should have taken to study those issues, sometimes those lower ballot measures get a little bit ignored, I think, by most humans at times. And so I'd be concerned that city council races would also begin to fall on that lower level fatigue of getting down to the bottom of the ballot and just not really having had the time to look at the critical issues facing the city. You know, national and state issues oftentimes are the same but very different from what goes on here locally, as I spoke of earlier tonight. So I think that it's important that people who run for council have an absolute passion for this city. And sometimes I'm afraid if they get mixed with a partisan election, that could change. Now, if they're put on the constitutional years, might not be so bad. We wouldn't be as mixed up with as many races, and there could be more focus on the local community.
Any other questions for Mr. Archer? Great. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Larry Allen?
Larry Allen, 621 Yosemite, Mesquite, Texas. Councilman O'Shea, Councilman Casper, City Manager Kahili, and City Secretary Land, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. And committee members, thank you for your service. That I know you spent hours and hours listening and gleaning items through people's comments. But to get right to it, let's talk. I'd like to just give you a brief, my background. I was privileged to be employed by the city of Mesquite for 29 years within the police department, and then after my retirement, I served on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 6 years, and now I'm on the 4B board. But the first item on my list is I'd like to talk about police department staffing. To give you a little history, if you've heard this, just tell me and I'll skip over it. But the 1.5 minimum item that was put in place on the city charter, so addition to the city charter, the background on is some citizens in Mesquite and the Mesquite Police Association started looking at what we had then. So this is 1981, 82, somewhere in there, and saw that we were not able at that point with current staffing levels to take care of the needs of the citizens of Mesquite and our visitors. So a petition drive was initiated, and the item was put on the ballot, and of course the item was successful during the election, and it was added to the charter. So that brings us to the 1.5 that we've had for probably 30 years. And I think it's worked well for us. At times, positions have been added, so we've gone up past the 1.5 minimum. Now, my suggestion would be to keep the 1.5 where we are. And then determine, I've seen one comment that they would suggest 5 to 10 more officers added to patrol. Of course, that's a long and tedious process to hire somebody that just walks in the door and take a long time. But if we stayed at the 1.5 and our elected officials committed to a ordinance, which I believe could be done, where over a period of time, say a 5-year period, that we add 2 officers a year or 5-year, whatever timeline we might think would be plausible with funding, that we could go forward with that. So I would definitely be against just changing it to 1.6 or 1.7. That puts us back in the same railroad car that we've been in for 30 years of nobody really wanting to change it. And we couldn't really depend in 2 years, 5 years that the item would come up and the council would be agreeable to place the item, agenda on for the next election. So that's basically my thoughts on police department staffing. If you have a question on that, I'll take that, or I'll move on. Gary?
Listen, pardon me, I got a little bit of laryngitis. If we went to 1.6 or 1.7, do you have any concerns that a lot of that would go to staffing, administration rather than patrol?
Well, I think that would come from a directive from the city manager to the police chief, that the council's consensus would be that those positions be assigned in a certain section of the police department, and not removing current staffing in the patrol division, that they remain there and the new employees are added to there. So I think that's a management question, and it can be addressed by our council.
Thank you.
What would you think about just taking that ratio out of the charter altogether? It sort of implies, doesn't it, that that's a standard for the city? And actually, the way it's functioning now, I guess, is more of a floor. But what about taking it out altogether and letting the council respond to the needs of the community through the budget process, instead of trying to embed something like that in the charter?
It's kind of a twofold question there, but it was implemented because previous councils refused to address the issue. So the minimum at that time recommended by the FBI was probably higher than that. It's probably pushing 2.5 to 3 probably for a city our size. But we could not fund 2.0 or 2.5. And so I would recommend retaining the 1.5 and having our council do something, put something in place before the end of the year, or before these items were put on the ballot that says, we're going to hire 10 people in the next 5 years, and then that would be put in place. And just a reminder, there is a ordinance in place, if I remember correctly, that allows the police chief to hire 5 officers above the complement when we have full strength. Is that still correct? And so if we attain that level of full strength, then boom, let's go, police chief. Let's line them up. And so I think the underlying problem would be recruiting, as it has always been. I don't know what our current entry-level pay scale is, but the top out, I think, in 5 years is about $78,000. So the top out's great. I assume the entry-level is at above the standard here in the Metroplex, if not close. And so recruiting, people have recruiting everywhere. I think Mesquite has been successful in that area. Retention, we never know. We, in the years past, tried to find the best and retain the best. And once they get in training and complete the academy, get put in a squad car, viewpoints change. And so when we get to that 2-year mark and what we say 10-4 and route, that's a long time when they're, from the day they walk into the door and they're 10-4 and route by themselves. So y'all have heard this about recruiting and the minimum, and so to sum my thoughts up, leave it there, but hopefully our elected officials that commit to, we're going to hire X amount of officers that, and the bottom line is budget, and it's very expensive. We can't hire 30, 40 officers to move it to 2.0. So, any further questions on that item?
Doesn't look like there is. So.
Sir?
It does not look like there are any other questions on that one.
The next item is council pay, and I would recommend leaving the council pay where it is. And my reasoning for that is the access that our elected officials have to health insurance for themselves and their families, that they have that capability to seek that health insurance through the city of Mesquite, and I believe it's at the employee rate, which is fair, I feel. And then once they leave the council, if it's still correct, they have accessibility to health insurance once they leave the council, and they pay the rate of the same rate a retiree would pay. So I think I'm correct on that. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I have those wrong. But that accessibility to that health insurance outpaces any $300, $400, $500 a month that a council person might need insurance. That's a might need item. So that's my comments on council pay. Any question on that? Okay, next item, term limits. I do not support putting on the ballot a term limit number. I feel the election process works. Every year, part of the council comes up for re-election, and I believe that works, and I support that 100%. If the council member or somebody running for office feels strongly about a term limit, I feel they should stop running for reelection. You know, it's sometimes we have people that need to be voted out and new people voted in, but I support our current system that we have. Single-member districts, I don't support that. We have council people elected to represent a certain area within the city. I believe it's divided in 4 quadrants. And I feel like they're responsible for that quadrant. And the at-large council members, I've reached out to them and to mine, but I want my council person to focus on my area where I live, and I feel that's their responsibility. So that's my comment on single member district. Let me add one thing, addendum to it, and I agree with the previous speaker. If we remain the way we are, if we can, the rest of the citizens of Mesquite can vote somebody out if they need to. In a single member district, that might not be possible. So it's probably a two-edged sword on that. The next item, moving elections to November. It's always been, and just because something's always been this way, I don't predicate my comments on that, but the May election, municipal May election, everybody, I would think, knows it pertains to the City of Mesquite municipal election. And I think it's served us well, and it will continue to serve us well. I agree with the comments about the November election. This November, it might not be clogged up, confused, but it sure will be in 2020 and maybe in 18. And it would bump, if I understand, where it would fall on the ballot with municipal elections, bump it to the bottom. But if we keep it in May, people go to the polls and they know it's about the May elections. So that would be my thoughts on the May election. So any questions about any of those items I covered or something else I need to cover? I guess my closing comment would be is, when I thought about this, it's not what other cities do, but it's what Mesquite, Texas does. Will be the future of what happens in this town of currently, I think our population's estimated at 140,000 people. So, committee, thank you for listening to me. Thank you, council members, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. And Mayor Pickett.
Good evening. Thank you for having us here tonight. Stan Pickett, 512 Woodstream Place, 75149 Mesquite. And just I was talking to Councilman Archer before, and we were having kind of this conversation about, what are we here to do tonight? And I appreciate your comments very much. Thank you for making those. But I'm kind of in his boat. I don't really want to come up here and tell you what my opinions are. As elected officials, whether we choose to believe it or not, we have influence, and I don't mean over you. I'm talking about just in our everyday walks of life. I respect and want to have the opportunity for our citizens to vote on what we feel like they need to vote on. And that's really my comment tonight. If term limits are on the ballot, then I respect the right of our citizens to make that decision. And I will always respect the right of our citizens to make those decisions. And I thank you for your service and your time. But I felt like it was important not to get up and talk about all the different aspects of that, because I just have there's a fine line between discussing personal opinion when you're an elected official and talking about policy. And so that I don't cross that line, so that I don't get into trouble, I just want to say that I really thank you, and I want to respect the process and allow what needs to be done in May to be done. All right?
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you, guys.
Anyone else? All right. I think that now concludes all of the meetings that are scheduled for the Charter Review Committee at this point. We are in the process of preparing a report. I dropped the ball on getting most of the homework done. It has been started, but we should have it to you. It is due to the council, I think, by their first meeting in December. Correct? Yeah. So we have a little bit of time, and at least there won't be another opportunity for me to use the dog ate my paper excuse, because we won't be meeting again. So, but we will certainly get a draft circulated here in the next week, and then invite any comments from any of the individual committee members to be attached to that report. Any comments or any discussion amongst the committee members?
When do you look for the reports? Are our comments to you to go into the report? When do you look for those?
We would probably want those, since we really won't be editing those, we'll probably give you till right before Thanksgiving to get those to us. When we circulate the draft report, we'll obviously have the deadline in there for you to get back with comments to the report, and then also then your individual comments as a committee member. So we'll be looking for Scrivener type comments, stylistic comments, or anything you wanted to rephrase in the report itself, and then also inviting you to make your personal comments.
Do we send these comments into anyone, or we're just going to have a meeting and discuss them?
We had planned on having everyone, if you wanted to write your personal comments, you could do that, and then we were just going to attach them all to the report.
Okay, I'm confused.
I am too.
Okay.
So where is this report generated?
The report is generated from the different meeting minutes that we've kept, the city secretary has kept.
Okay.
And it basically will just delineate all of the different comments that have been received. It will then also attach the survey results.
Okay.
And then it will invite each of you to make comments.
So we'll see a copy of that?
Yes,
Okay.
you will.
Got it. And that'll be based on the input that we received?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Did we clear up your questions?
I think so. I had a different impression, but I
Okay.
think what I'm clear on it now.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Anything else? No? All right. Well, with that, when we scheduled this meeting, I promised everyone cookies, or at least I promised the committee cookies, and we do have enough cookies for everyone. So we'll be gathering in the council conference room, and you're welcome to join us for some cookies from the Great American Cookie Company. So thank you. Actually, Jeff promised the cookies too.
Well, I'll just let that be a guide for my students when they don't have their homework to also bring cookies, and that makes everybody happy.